Thanks everyone for coming today. I'll just do the acknowledgement of the country and then I'll hand over to Emily and Joe. So I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're gathering today and pay respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that respect and welcome to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. So, as I said, thank you very much for coming today, and I'd like to welcome Professor Emily Lancet, who is the Chief Health Economist and Torch's former CIA, as well as Joe Watson, Deputy Chair of the PBAC, Chair of the Health Technology Assessment Consumer Consultative Committee, and Deputy Chair of the Consumer Health Forum to welcome us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. It's so nice to see everyone in the same room because it's been a project of lots of as many projects have been over the last however many years of virtual catch-ups. So it's very nice to see people in person. I too would like to add my acknowledgement and respect to First Australians here in Australia, Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. It's a real pleasure to be asked to make a few opening remarks with Joe. In moving to the new role, I sadly had to step off all my grants, and this was the one that was closest to my heart, and I was definitely the saddest to step away from. I just wanted to offer a couple of reflections really on Torch. I think it's well known here, but in terms of the why, we have robust methods for HDA, and I always say Australia has such a proud history in that regard. But that's mainly focused, as everyone in this room would know, on adults. So I think these questions very much came from PBAC and MSAC, so they're clearly questions that the committees wanted addressed. And it was really about ensuring that we have appropriate methods for children, essentially, so in terms of the measurement and valuation of child health. I want to acknowledge and thank MRFF funding the project. I wanted to then think about, well, some of the wonderful things about Torch. And I think first and foremost, it was, for me personally, it was addressing questions that were clearly of use. So there was stuff that was going to be used, hopefully, because the users of them had posed those questions. So I think that, and the ability that perhaps doing work that would have impact in a really tangible way to an important population in our society. So thinking about the health and wellbeing of children was definitely top of the list, but very close was, for me, in terms of thinking about the wonderful things about Torch, was the team. It was absolutely and I mean team in the broadest sense, so our CI team, the wonderful group that's been brought together, the postdocs that have been employed who are now mid-career researchers, the senior researchers themselves moved on to wonderful appointments. We actually had 21 associate investigators, so a really large number of associate investigators, but in many ways really helpful. So that was spread across the world, so it gave us that reach into not just different countries in an academic sense, because we certainly have academics in that, but different countries into a policy sense, in terms of we had folk from NICE and elsewhere. And then I also think the team, it's always very much felt that the team extended to our governance. So we had very helpful end user group, which of course Andrew Wilson chaired. And I always left those meetings, which were quite regular, and these were amazingly busy people who gave us, so our end user group, as many will know, are members of PBAC, MSAC and Life Saving Drugs panel. So amazingly busy people who gave up their time, and I always felt that we would leave those meetings in a much better position than an hour before, because we would have got great insight. And the same goes for our advisory board, which Joe chairs, and that advisory board was a great mix of wonderful academics, Steve Jan, Lisa Gold, etc. But then also policy folk, again, Andrew Mitchell was key on that, but then also the child health organisations and they brought that kind of much more experience of the sector that we were doing work to impact. And then the meetings with the Department of Health that Andrew Mitchell would chair, the same thing. I would always leave those thinking, okay, we're in better shape again than we were an hour before, because we've really received in real time those insights that has helped shape the research. So I very much think the research has been shaped by wonderful CI team, AI team, but that wonderful governance who always felt like they were part of the team as well. Then thinking about our wonderful investigators, when I thought child health, I think Stavros. So in terms of health economists who have that depth of long track record on working on topics of the health economics related to children and young people. Obviously Cam, that depth of experience of many things, but particularly for the point of this grant, the social preferences. Joe, it felt like such a coup when I know Cam and Stavros were at, I think it might have been at HESG when we were madly putting the grant together, and reached out to Joe to see if Joe might be interested, and it just felt like such a coup to have Joe part of the team, but then more locally the wonderful team across University of Sydney, ANU, Flinders, Wollongong, has been one of the best things about the project. And then methodologically, intellectually, it's been a really stimulating project in the sense of we've got a range of methods that needed to be brought to bear to this topic. So systematic reviews, we had Elizabeth Martin was probably completely sick of systematic reviews because we had a lot of them, but they were so important to bring together, well, what is the evidence base? The clinical trials, Jermaine was just so generous right off the bat to say, yes, we could get involved in her trial and add instruments to her trial. The cohort studies that Alison and Kirsten led, the psychometric studies. I hadn't personally worked in psychometrics before, and I still wouldn't say I've worked in psychometrics, but I've brushed up against now Sarah Smith at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, has been incredibly generous with her expertise, but actually helping, me and perhaps others who had a real interest and appetite for but knew nothing about, very generously has kind of walked us through that, and I think that's been a really great collaboration. Of course, discrete choice experiment methods that Elizabeth is leading, econometrics throughout, but the collaboration more recently with old colleagues at Monash, led by Jingjing Li, who's here, and Tony Harris, allowed us to tap into this expertise that sits in Australia and other areas, but I think Australia's been a real leader with Jingjing and Tony's work at looking at the actual decisions that PBAC in particular have made. So we're now collaborating, and I'm sure Jingjing will be talking about that later. So I think methodologically very stimulating and interesting. Wonderful output. Kim tells me that the team now has 16 publications. I think that synthesis of the evidence base is a nice legacy. A point in time we have an understanding, okay, this is what the evidence was telling us across a range of topics. We'll be finishing, once we finish the project, with new value sets, particularly for PEDSCO. I think that's a real contribution in that, PEDSCO is one of the most used, and Stavros could correct me if it's not the most quality of life measure in child and youth health, but wasn't on the quality scale. So I think this is a lovely contribution of this project that will live beyond it. The distributional weights for qualities that Cam and Elizabeth is leading, all the wonderful work looking at making great use of our cohort studies of LSAC and others. But then also I think the training and capability building, not just of our mid-career researchers and our postdocs, but I can only talk personally, but I feel like I've, after working on this project, my own capability, I've learned lots from working with real experts in respective fields, great collaborations, and I would say good friends. And I think we had the other thing I wanted to, I didn't say where I should have, but the leadership group. So right from the outset, we built a leadership group that met for periods every week, sometimes multiple times a week, and then it would stretch to 2 weeks at times. But this regular cadence of a group of folk who were pushing this forward, and that was Kirsten, Martin, Elizabeth, and Kim. And I just wanted to finish up by saying that I think the kind of writing was on the wall for me when we first put the grant together. And you'll remember the call came, I can't remember, was it just before Christmas, and then we had to deliver, put it in not too long into the new year, so it was very fast paced. And so the work package components of the grant were led and written by the respective experts in all the fields. So it was very collaborative in the way we put the grant together. But then I think really Kirsten and Elizabeth and I said at the time, if it wasn't for Kirsten, we wouldn't have got that grant in. So I think that right from the start, it was that collaborative spirit and of working together to build initially the grant application, but then over time it's obviously been the grant itself and the delivery of that. So to finish, I guess where I started, I think it's been very intellectually rich, a wonderful, wonderful team, and important work that hopefully, and I think Joe will perhaps talk more about this, have impact on the way that HTA is done, or one, feed into provide evidence and tools that could be used in that way to ultimately hope improve health and wellbeing for children. So thank you very much for inviting me back to talk on to open and to add some reflections, and yeah, look forward to hearing more. Thanks everyone.
So good morning everyone, and I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're here on today, the Ngunnawal country, and pay my respect to elders past and present. So it's really exciting actually to be involved with something that's starting to get to the end of it, right? So I'm really pleased the day's arrived where we can get some updates and have a think about, the findings and I guess try and pull some reflections together. I echo Emily's thoughts on the fantastic teams that have been part of Torch. It's really been inspiring to me to see everyone come together across something that can be incredibly complex in the sense of not just the academic considerations and the methodological questions, but then how would you see that go somewhere in terms of being used in the spaces that this MRFF stream, is sort of focused on. I had a joke earlier this morning with Kirsten and Brendan about not looking at how sausages are made, and part of the challenge I think for all of us is working out what we do with such a rich and deep set of findings here and also with Quokka in terms of trying to guide better ways of thinking about these questions in health technology assessment, but make that actually happen in the way that we do HTA at the Commonwealth level at least, in terms of academic evaluations and then passing through into departmental processes and then finally decision-making committees and their subcommittees. This is not the end of all of that. This is just the beginning of thinking about all of that. And so that's exciting as well as, I think, also challenging. I wanted to briefly just touch on three aspects of the Torch work that I think I wanted to pull out, that I guess I value, and not just in the sense of someone who sits embedded within HTA at the Commonwealth level, but as someone who also engages a lot with our external stakeholders, and especially our patients and their groups. So the recently published Sellers and colleagues piece in health policy, a fascinating piece of work that looked at the decision maker perspectives on committee processes here in Australia. So at this point in time, in contested spaces, and an environment where everyone is really second guessing what happens in the room behind closed doors, it's a really valuable contribution. And I really welcomed it being pulled together in the way it was. It's very timely as an insight into decision making. But I think it also drew out what are the strengths and some of the challenges in the current system. I think it really focused on how we do try and practice deliberation. Practice deliberation in an environment that is, as I said, contested, but an environment that also has many sort of demands on it. And I think it showed very nicely what is some of the limitations of the data offerings we get in the technical sense. In a way that, while many of us could walk around and talk about that, it comes from a place that I think has even a more sort of respectful place in terms of consideration for those who care to think about what it's saying. So that article, for me, is going to be really valuable going forward, and I think it's going to be an article that will be cited a lot for different reasons, for different agendas, but for a long time. So thank you for that. The second thing I wanted to reflect on is the Torch newsletter. It's a big hit. The Torch newsletter has actually been really essential. The Torch newsletter amongst community stakeholders is very visible and has been very important. It's been a way for you all to promote yourselves as the researchers, the team, the updates for sure. But you've offered up something that you don't see a lot in many research projects, which is this consistent reach out to the external stakeholders and community. So that effectiveness of being a consistent communication tool, I really valued, and it's made it very easy for us to share it with supporters. And as a result, you've widened your supporter circle with an awareness of the study, but more broadly an awareness of health economists, and let's face it, you need all the help you can get. So finally, Torch and Quokka, as two MRFF funded projects, have been looking at various aspects of this overall topic, right? But, you know, at the same time, so I think the way the Torch and Quokka teams have embraced the opportunities that presents has been, really comforting for me. So bravo, all of you. I mean, that was tricky, and you've navigated those waters really well. And as someone who's been, involved across both, the collaboration has I think, deepened the richness and the results of the work and the efforts and the intellectual considerations. So I'm going to draw out as my final thing the collaboration. One of the things that brought up was the systematic review. So you had, Peasgood and Howell as the joint first authors. You had 15 other colleagues involved in a review that, as the article itself notes, is probably the first of its kind, and on a really important topic of the social value of child health. So well done. That article, by the way, is again really important in the sense that for the end users and the implications of policy development, it really challenges us to stop reducing everything down to this notion of child versus adult, or child at particular age points. again, complex, but it shows that that diversity of thinking across all the studies that were selected for that review has really begged more questions to be asked and investigated in the future, but it also begs frameworks of which people like myself and others working to think seriously about not making assumptions in the way we think of things, often around some of those sensitive subjects of resource allocation and decision making and the transparency of that. Any of the work that any of us do where we sit with families and talk about these sorts of decisions, we know that there is nothing simple about answers you get back about how parents and carers think about decision making on behalf of their kids, but then how they also try and navigate that with so many other expectations and pressures on them. So anything we can do to support better handling those processes for them is a good thing, and congratulations, Torch, because you've helped us on that path, so thank you.